Hi, my name is Chris Wasko, and I am a survivor of narcissistic abuse.
Hi, all. It's Zoe here. Thanks for hanging out with me again today and joining the Surviving with Zoe podcast, a conversation where amazing, inspirational survivors from all walks of life share their personal stories and expert advocates educate you, our audience, in order to break stigmas and taboos regarding mental health and trauma, kind of like free therapy and permission to always give yourself grace and compassion as we are ultimately all just surviving every day. Before we dive in, we would like to add a trigger warning for anyone that is vulnerable to particular issues. Please pause if needed and check out our timestamps in our description if you need to skip ahead. Lastly, if you could please hit the subscribe button and follow us on Spotify, Apple, Instagram, and TikTok. We would really appreciate it. Since we are a new pod, we need all the love that we can get. And of course, we want to amplify our guests' voices. Our guest today, Chris Wasko, is a spiritual counselor, energy healer, and psychic medium who turned her own experience of surviving narcissistic abuse into a powerful path of healing and transformation. After making the life-changing decision to break away from her parents to protect herself and her children, Chris began a deep journey of trauma recovery that led to a profound spiritual awakening. She is the author of An Old Soul's Journey and the creator of Spicy Old Souls, where she helps survivors, cycle breakers, and old souls heal trauma, regulate their nervous systems, and reconnect with who they truly are. Chris joins us today to share her survival story, what it really takes to break generational cycles, the weight of being the black sheep, and how healing the body and energy can lead you back to your most authentic self. Welcome to Surviving with Zoe, Chris.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Chris, take us back to the beginning and tell us your story.
My story is one of surprise because growing up with narcissists, you don't really know your parents are narcissists. I certainly didn't. My parents were my parents, and I did everything I could to try to play my role, I guess. I am the middle child of three, and as a middle child, you get to watch your older sibling make a lot of the mistakes. And in my case, watch your younger sibling get away with everything. And so a lot of it was navigating that, feeling that there was a lot of things that weren't very fair. Especially because my younger sibling is the only boy, so my parents very much valued having a son. And that was very apparent to all of us. This was no secret. So that was probably the first hints that there's some narcissism. But I didn't know what narcissism was yet, what a narcissist was. So I just was trying to be noticed. And over time, I recognized that I was really changing myself to conform. My parents were very physically abusive, very emotionally abusive. The worst things that have been said to me in this lifetime have been said by my own parents. And these are the people that were supposed to love me. And while they probably loved me to the best of their ability, it was very conditional. It's all they knew in terms of love. And my breaking away from that was pivotal in my healing. It wasn't quick. It was definitely something that progressed over time. I felt like motherhood is what really started to wake me up to it and the aspects that just were not okay. And for a while, I did allow it. And I certainly regret some choices in terms of that. My father hit my first child and he was only 2 years old. That should have been my walk away moment, but it wasn't. I chose to forgive him. I chose to go back, much like people who've been abused do, because they were my parents and I didn't want to break away from my parents because that also meant breaking away from my siblings, whom I at the time was close to. And it was another 8 years where my father threatened to then hit my husband. And that was it for me. I was done. I walked away. When you walk away from people that are abusive, you don't feel freedom first. Your nervous system is hardwired in relation to abuse. So my first feeling was fear. I was absolutely terrified of what they were going to do, how they might try and hurt me in any way. My biggest fear is that they were going to try and take my kids or try and get access to them, because narcissistic parents become even more narcissistic grandparents, and they feel they have an ownership to their grandchildren and feel like they have a power you shouldn't, even though you're the parent. So I absolutely felt that. I started just taking steps to heal. I needed to heal myself on so many levels, emotionally, physically. I had a thyroid condition that I have since healed since breaking away from my parents. And I don't believe in coincidences. And I know that that was a lot of because of all the trauma and abuse I had dealt with in my life. But the real surprise in all of this is I did not realize that this was a spiritual awakening was occurring at the same time, because in my healing, I would be talking to somebody just like you and I are speaking now, and I would see somebody in spirit right behind them. And because I was so new to this, I had no idea what was going on. I didn't know how to communicate with them. So for a little bit, I ignored it, because what does one do when you start seeing dead people? You just kind of hope you're not going crazy. And over time, it's kept happening, and other things started happening. Like all of my clair senses were coming on board, and I was aware of them, and I was really changing in so many ways. But I recognized later I was changing my frequency, my vibration was changing. All of my trauma had muted all of these abilities that I've had since birth. But trauma mutes intuition. Trauma mutes these types of abilities that we all can naturally do. And healing that allowed me to be truly who I was meant to be in this lifetime.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about yourself. I know you're probably only scraping the surface of your journey, but there were so many things that you said that I think anyone listening to this can relate, and I can definitely relate. My husband's the middle child. He's the black sheep of his family, and I'm particularly interested in family systems when it comes to narcissism, as you would know a lot about. I'd love to know, like, what were your siblings' roles and what were your parents' roles in this family dynamic? Because I know, like, a lot of people think that if a couple of people agree, oh, you know, you're in a family, you're not doing something right, they think, well, then you should listen and conform with your family. But generally, it's kind of like the narcissist makes the decision that the black sheep isn't doing something right, and then they allow other people in the family that are deeply controlled by them to speak on behalf of them. So I wonder what everyone's experience was, because every sibling probably got a different version of your parents.
Yes, absolutely. We all received a different version of them. My situation is slightly unique in that my older sister and I were 8 years apart. So if anyone knows about birth order, that essentially makes me also not just a middle child, but a functional first, because we are more than 5 years apart. My brother would also be a functional first as the firstborn male of our family. Now, the other aspect too that makes it a little unique is my sister and I have different fathers biologically. My dad did ultimately adopt my sister, and that's a whole mess in its own, because my sister's biological father was still very much alive, and my mother very much manipulated that relationship. So my sister didn't see very much of her biological father growing up, because my mother was trying to now create her ideal family, and that would not have included him. So like I said, just some caveats that were thrown in there that didn't make it quote unquote normal. But as I 100% was the scapegoat of the family, I was, that was certainly the role that I recognized later. I didn't know it at the time, because when there were things that were happening and I didn't feel they were right, I would speak up. I would say something. And I was labeled the problem because of that. Now, when I talk about the things I would speak up about, these were things like, my sister had struggled with her weight for
Mhm.
most of her life. And my parents were incredibly cruel about it,
Yeah.
especially our father. And he would make comments and I would say something. And that was not acceptable. That was not
Yeah.
okay. So here I
Yeah.
am, like, that's not okay. It hurts her feelings. That's mean.
Yeah.
She would order a meal at dinner and he would puff out his cheeks and make this face
Mhm.
like, oh, you're gonna get fat,
Yeah.
and right
Condescending.
after she'd order with the waiter still standing there, it was very embarrassing. So just
Mhm.
things like that. And I often got slapped because I
Mhm.
spoke up. And essentially, what led to my thyroid condition because I got punished for speaking up, for
Mhm.
speaking
Yeah.
out for things that I knew were not right. It's not okay to treat people that way. So that's just one example, And then my brother, as I said, being the only male, he was the golden child and he was the baby of the family. So he was very much treated like a baby often is treated. They get away with a lot more. They're able to do things that the older siblings were not able to do. But also the treatment was always like, you can tell he was loved more.
Yeah.
And that was deeply felt.
Mhm.
And he knew it too. He knew he got away with it. I mean, he would laugh and chuckle and became, a little bit of a brat, I would say. Even as we were growing up, I would say we were close for a
Mhm.
while because of the fact that our parents were abusive, especially our father. And when you have a very scary parent, because he absolutely parented with fear, you kind of form a little bit of a tribe amongst your siblings.
Mhm.
So that tribe was good for a while until it wasn't, because when you have narcissistic parents, you want to please them. So it becomes very competitive amongst the children. And when you have a parent that triangulates, like my mother often did
Mhm.
with myself and my sister, uh, there's always this level of competition of feeling like you have to be better, you have to do
Yeah.
better. You start complaining about your siblings with your mother, because your mother's already doing that.
Yeah.
And it's just a lot of toxicity that just continues to develop and evolve, but it literally becomes that family system. It's a
Yeah.
toxic system, but it's all you know because it's the family system.
Narcissism has become quite a buzzword, but I think family systems has only recently like kind of hit social media and like the whole dynamic, like you said, the scapegoat and it's like the top narcissist and then like your dad and then everyone kind of forms under them. So thank you for explaining that. I want to just pivot a little bit backwards because I had quite a reaction emotionally to you opening up about your father hitting your 2-year-old child. I just honestly was just so sad for you. And I just wanted to say, I'm so sorry that that happened because with myself having my first child this year, I can't imagine somebody else doing that to my child. So, can you walk us through like how that affected you emotionally? And also, like, I liked what you said about like, the healing didn't happen overnight and walking away didn't happen overnight. And forgiving your father, that's a natural step in the process with a narcissist because you don't want to walk away from everything familiar. You don't want to lose every single person in your family because of one other person. But at the end of the day, sometimes that does have to happen to protect yourself. So, can you take us back there to how you felt?
Yeah, and first of all, thank you for saying that. I do appreciate it because it has taken a lot of time to
Mhm.
forgive myself in that,
Mhm.
and I felt like I was responsible for it happening. Um, it happened because I had been nursing my second child,
Mhm.
and and he spit up all over me, and I didn't have I needed an extra burp cloth, so I excused myself to go get one,
Mhm.
and I came back, which what I thought was mere moments, but of course these things only happen in those mere moments. I saw
Mhm.
the look on my son's face And I knew exactly what happened because I used to wear that look. I knew that look to my
Yeah.
core.
Mhm.
And I I grabbed him. I went outside. I called my husband and I said, I know that my father just hit our child and I don't know what to do about it. And my
Mhm.
husband's very level-headed, thankfully.
Mhm.
You always need the more balanced one in the relationship, and that's certainly him. And he said, well, he really just guided me on how to talk to our son and ask him what happened. He's like, you don't
Yeah.
want to lead him, just ask him questions, ask what
Yeah.
happened, and just don't act worried, all that stuff. And I did. And my mother walked in. And my mother started trying to convince my son it never happened, even though she wasn't there. So she played her role
Yeah.
of protecting the bully.
Yeah.
And it was all just playing out in front of me. And I absolutely lost it on my mother.
Yeah.
And like, how dare you?
Yeah.
And I said, I know I was never under your protection, but I would
Mhm.
have thought your grandchild was.
Right.
And I was at their house, so I had to figure out how to leave.
Yeah.
And I did first confront my father, and he absolutely was disgusting at first,
Mhm.
lying and accusing me of basically being the bad guy. Because again, we play these roles, we're in this system. And I said, okay, so you're telling me a 2-year-old is lying. And he finally owned up to it and tried to make it seem like it was okay. And I wasn't accepting it. And I just said, we need to leave and we're going to
Yeah.
leave.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have a car. My parents had, what had happened was my husband had dropped me off to stay with my parents for the week with my kids. And
Mhm.
so they could spend time with my children.
Mhm.
And so here I am, like I exposed my children to this. So that's why I felt at fault. And
Mhm.
you would have thought this would have been a prime opportunity for my dad to do better and be better. But I was villainized. I was made to be
Yeah.
the bad guy. While my dad was apologetic, my mother was not. She was nasty. She was accusing me of creating problems like I always do. When my own child got hit by her husband, my father.
Yeah.
And so just seeing that play out in real time was surreal. I was angry, but I was so upset and I was hormonal. I mean, here I'm nursing my
Yeah.
child
Yeah.
who was rather young at the time. And yeah, again, it took a long time to forgive myself because that should have been my time to be done and to walk away because a
Yeah.
tiger doesn't change their stripes. And my dad certainly still to this day has not. I haven't spoken to my father in almost 10 years. And I
Wow.
know still he is the same person, if not worse,
Yeah.
because they don't
Yeah.
tend to get better. They tend to get worse.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it was challenging. It was definitely one of the most challenging things I've experienced.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really, really understand that level of shame to forgive and go back and doubt yourself. Because again, it's like before gaslighting became like a term, it's like you were being gaslit by
Yes.
everyone it sounds like apart from your husband.
Yes.
And oh my gosh, I'm just, I'm so emotional for you because the anger that you would have felt in that moment, because you're almost seeing your son go through what your inner child needed to heal from. It's interesting what you said about the role that your mum played of protecting the bully, because people don't realize that this is very common. Like it's almost in every single family. Like I've spotted it immediately, like in multiple families. And I think that the role that the protector of the bully plays is just as evil as the bully because they
100%.
are standing by and allowing this abuse to happen. And then they're also doing the dirty work
Mhm.
for the narcissist. Like
Yeah.
it's really psychologically messed up. It's like if the narcissist murdered somebody and then the protector of them is like, I'll clean it up.
A
And it,
100%.
and it didn't
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
Like,
They enable the behaviors. They make
yeah,
it okay. They clean it up.
yeah,
And she started to enable my brother. My brother turned into my father. He's
yeah,
probably still abusing his own children to this day, and it's
yeah,
heartbreaking. I
yeah,
know, and I know because as my gifts evolved and over time, when I tap into the energies, I know for a fact one of his kids in particular is going to have a really hard time. And it's my brother's fault
Yeah.
because he became our abuser and a worse version of him. And while my sister's turning into a version of our mother, and they don't see it when you are, that is the other thing too, when we are in these type of family systems, we absolutely, part of our healing is to look at ourselves and look at the narcissistic elements within us. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that we are a
100%.
narcissist, but we
Yeah.
all have the tendencies,
Yeah.
and we don't start to see them until we become a parent
Yeah.
or we are in a relationship and we
And
have
the
a problem.
person's like mirroring back or your,
Correct.
and also and like even how you described like your husband being level-headed, it's like that he was raised in a different family, different values. So you're like, okay, like I know that my family's not normal because there's other families out there that are acting differently, or this person was raised. And oh my gosh, it's so apparent how children become exactly like their parents. And I'm so just like not surprised to hear that your sister and brother became like your mom and your dad. And it's really like that generational cycle of
Yes.
you walking away. Because as much as we don't want to admit it, like we do have these elements of our parents' values and personality traits within us. So I really appreciate that honesty of having narcissistic traits within yourself that you have to acknowledge, because I do believe people can change over time. Maybe not narcissists, but people that are conditioned by narcissists over time can look at themselves and say, hey, I don't want to be like that. Can I ask you just a little bit about each of your parents? You know, they had conditional love for you, which is very common with narcissists. It sounds like your dad was the more physically abusive. Do you know why they ended up that way? Like a little bit about their past? Do you know anything about their parents? Was it passed down? Just so that any of our listeners can spot any signs of this type of narcissism or physical abuse or family systems from your story.
Absolutely. Narcissism is 100% a generational pattern, and it is learned behavior.
Mm.
And there's also adaptive behaviors. So we, from the, age of like 0 to 10, we are adapting to our environment. And whatever that environment is, our job is to survive it and conform to it and become the person we need to be. So in my father's case, his parents were definitely physically abusive, as well as his grandparents. That was absolutely there. And really both of my parents went to Catholic school, and they still had corporal punishment. So
Yeah.
physical abuse was 100% a thing at that time,
Yeah.
and acceptable and expected.
Yeah.
So the fact that I had it isn't by no means surprising. And a lot of my friends did too. But over time, as I would like tell stories of things that happened, I would have my friends like look at me and like they always make this face like, that's not okay.
Yeah.
Like it took like seeing reactions and that the shock value of some of the things I experienced. So that was kind of a big note for me to make over the years. And I would defend them. Oh, but my parents had it really tough. Oh, my parents were really struggling as children. Oh, we basically learn their story and we make excuses for them because that's what we do. We become enablers ourselves, and it doesn't mean we have to villainize, but it's really, we don't have to accept bad behavior. And I think that's not what we're taught. We are taught we need to accept bad behavior and make excuses for it.
Mhm.
And, my parents, while they had no money growing up and when they first met, they came into it over time and became rather wealthy. And money brings out a different energy in people.
Yeah.
And that was really challenging too. And it made it really hard for even others to believe that I had the experience I had. Because when you looked at my parents, they were wealthy, good looking people. So when my parents were painting this narrative that I was the problem, uh, it was easy to believe that. And while I did not make it easy, I will say, I'm not going to say I was the perfect child. I never want to come off as that. But especially now as a mother, I
Mhm.
know to have been treated the way I was treated as a child is by no means acceptable for any
Yeah.
parent. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter who.
Oh my gosh. And it's like people that are millennials, Gen X, it's like normal for us to say, oh yeah, my parents hit me.
Mhm.
Like it was normal back then. But you also meet other people our age, and like you said, with your friends' reactions, um, it's like a pivotal moment where maybe it doesn't sink in then because you're so young, you're processing it. But as an adult, or when you choose to break away, you look back and you're like, yeah, like I can't imagine my friends' parents doing that to them. Like, because yeah, you weren't the perfect child, but you were a child, full stop. So, and also anything that you considered not perfect about yourself was a reaction also to trauma and the abuse going on. Are you able to share, Chris? I know it's um, a really vulnerable topic, but the worst type of physical abuse from your parents that you experienced, and what was it for?
My dad was very quick to have some sort of knee-jerk reaction, so it was usually over nothing.
Yeah.
One time that I recall, he asked me how my basketball practice was, and I said that we had a new assistant coach, and I my team practiced with the boys team, and I always like talking to the boys, and the new assistant coach didn't like that, and he made me run laps. So I told my dad I had to run laps,
Mhm.
and that wasn't fun. And I was saying, like, yeah, we have this new coach, and as I was trying to explain, he snapped. He's like, you think you have it so effing hard? And he starts, because I know the movement, he starts undoing his belt to
Yeah.
now pull it out. And
Yeah.
I was just like, no, I'm sorry. And I'm already apologizing. I'm sorry. I wasn't, no, I don't think I have it so
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
I would have been 14 when this happened.
Oh, wow.
And he's pulling it out, and he just starts hitting me. And I was the type of child that wasn't allowed to run. If you ran away, you were going to get a worse beating. So you
Yeah.
actually had to stay and take it. So
Yeah.
he just kept hitting me and hitting me and hitting me with his belt, telling me how much harder he had it and how I have nothing to gripe
Mm.
about. And so it was just, and that's just one example. I mean,
Yeah.
I just never remembered it ever making sense. It was
Yeah.
just he would snap and that was it because he probably had a bad day and something triggered him. I mean,
Exactly.
one
Yeah.
time he hit me so hard I peed my pants. I was terrified to leave my room, so I literally stayed in like my pee-soaked pants until he calmed down. But I remember shaking, and I'm like,
Mhm.
can I change? I don't think I should move. I mean, and at that time, I think I would have been around 7 or 8. And,
Oh,
just thinking of those things. So it was a lot of
yeah.
those type of things. And those are just a couple of examples. I,
Yeah.
I have a ton, and again, it was just, I had to take a lot. I had to endure a lot. My mom hit me too. She was more about using her brush or wooden spoons. That
Yeah.
was incredibly common.
Yeah.
One time she broke a spoon over my knee while hitting me, and I
Mhm.
kind of had like a nervous laughter kind of
Yeah.
reaction, like,
Yeah.
and she's like, "You think that's funny? I've got more." And I remember hearing her like scramble through the
Mhm.
drawers, getting a bigger spoon. And it's just this is how I was parented, and
And
it wasn't okay.
it's like generations. I don't mean to sound super old. I'm not that old, but generations these days just don't understand how normal this was
No,
back
no,
in
they
the
don't.
day.
They do not.
Like everything that you said, I've experienced on some level, and friends of friends or whatever. And it's like, now we're this generation of parents that do gentle parenting, like talk mental health to our kids. And it just made me think of, the incident with your dad hitting you with the belt that is so clear in your mind still to this day. over just a silly basketball practice story, like a normal thing for a 14-year-old girl to say. And it made me think of how angry he was at you for what he went through as a child. And it's just so clear that parents who hit their children like need to go to therapy, obviously, and feel their own feelings. But it's also a very interesting route that he took, because you can either go down two roads as an abuser. You can continue to abuse as you get older, or you want to protect like your child so that they never experience what you had to. So it's a very conflicted battle in the abuser's head, and not to put the spotlight on just the abuser, because survivors are just as, if not more important. But it's good to understand like the psychology behind why he's doing that, because what he's doing is as he hit you, he's hitting his younger self almost. Yes. Like, Chris, you're not allowed to act that way because I wasn't allowed to act that way.
Exactly.
That's so disturbing. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'm sorry to hear about your mom as well. And was she from a family as well that was physically abusive, or did she learn that from your father? Because I know of families that they just conform the husband or the wife to the discipline.
No, she was physically abused as well. Her father was a lot like my father in ways, and it was normal for them. It was completely normal. And you'll even hear people today that will say that a lot of the problems with children's behaviors now is that they are not hit and they're not put in line. I wholeheartedly disagree. While I do believe there are issues in that regard, I don't believe it is because of the lack of corporal punishment. I believe that there are other psychological elements that can be explored. A lot of the changes made in the educational system, a lot of things that are just environmentally going on in our food, in our water and medications and so on. I mean, I could soapbox on that all day, but a lot of people want to bring it down to that it's not taken care of in the home. And I disagree. And I will absolutely debate on that one, especially as a mother. I have 4 children, and they are very well-adjusted human beings. And a lot of it, though, is because I respect my children. Yes. And when you have respect for your children, you don't have trouble raising them. Especially, everyone always gets scared of the teenage years. I have almost 4 teenagers right now. I have 3 and a preteen. Teenagers are amazing, and they require respect just as we do. It doesn't mean they're in charge, but it means that they matter, and they know they matter. So they then respect you in return. And that is really what it comes down to. Yes, corporal punishment, any kind of hitting, that does command respect because it's fear-based. So that's what it comes down to. Oh, kids don't respect their parents anymore. Well, what if you start with respect and allow for that to be foundational in your relationship? Then maybe you'll have a better relationship with your children, and they will do better in life because of it.
And well said, first of all. I was just cheering inside to everything you were saying. But also, it just made me think of like how special your teenage years are. These are the years that you're forming like your values and morals and feelings, and you're experiencing every big emotion for the first time. So whoever is in that time of your life, which is usually your parents, you remember how they treat you, and you carry that with you, whether it was like pure love or violence or emotional abuse or whatever you went through. So like to mess with that special time with your child as a teenager, where they will literally remember that for the rest of their lives, is crazy to me, because you have the opportunity to almost guide them and listen to them. And like you said, give them that respect so that they can grow confidence. So there's just so many alternatives. And I agree. It's been like scientifically proved so many times that hitting does nothing for children. I mean, the couple of times, multiple times I was hit, it just made me angry. Like, that's what it does.
It's anger.
And that can either lead to just like severe trauma within yourself because you don't know how to resolve this anger, and kind of humiliation and disrespect. Yep. Like, it's like, I was speaking to another guest about this who was also hit as a child. And it's like, you emotionally hurt even more than physically because you're like, why is someone hurting me that is meant to love me? And just going off that, what are some of the ways that I don't want to use the word discipline, but maybe like guide your children that you have learned that are more positive than physical abuse?
Well, it always varies by age because, it's when the toddler years are definitely more challenging because reasoning with a toddler is not what it is to reason with a teenager. So depending on the age, it was always age appropriate. So with the toddler years, I think redirection is the best thing because kids get hyper focused on whatever they're doing. And if it's not working, redirect. Now, the other thing I feel is really important for children, especially in the younger years, is learn your child's way of learning. Are they a visual learner? Are they an auditory learner? Are they a kinesthetic learner? Because this is how they're seeing and exploring the world. So just as an example, my oldest child is a kinesthetic learner. He loved to touch everything. He is still to this day, if we go into a store and there's a ton of little glass kind of trinkets, I will look to him and be like, don't touch. Please don't touch. It's just who he is. But again, it's how his mind works. So when we understand that, we understand how they are and how they learn, we better understand how to parent them. So I knew if I was going to be in an environment, especially when he was younger, and there was a ton of things that he probably shouldn't be touching, I was going to remove us from the environment. I was going to make him conform to that environment if I could help it. Now, if I couldn't, I knew I had to do things to work with him, distract him in other ways. It really just depended on the situation, but I wish I would have learned that sooner because in the beginning I was conforming. I was trying to be the best parent. I was trying to be perfect. I wanted to make my own parents proud. Oh, look, I'm doing such a good job. So I would definitely yell and I would scold, and I was not a good parent in the beginning. I will be the first to say that I absolutely sucked. And I really had to hug that version of me. And the more I healed, the more I was able to heal even with my children, especially my oldest, who had to experience this growth with me, where I absolutely have sat with him and I have apologized for the parent he got in the beginning because he deserved better. He absolutely deserved better than me. And God love him. He's a beautiful soul. And, he's like, Mommy, it's okay. I love you. And I'm so proud of you. And, that'll make me cry. My kids can make me cry, but it's just, I value them. And the more you value your children for who they are and you help them be who they're meant to be, because they are born to us in the way they're meant to be. So the more we nourish that, we support that, and we don't try and stifle it, the more they evolve.
It seems like the key ingredient for success is to get curious about your child, get to know them. Because yes, their personality is still developing and all of that. But it's like children are wise. Like they teach you a lot about yourself. And like you said, like you really learned a lot about who you were by mothering. Are you able to go through those different learning styles for our audience again and what they mean?
Yeah, so the most common ones are the visual learning. You learn because you see a video, you see a demonstration, someone shows you, right? Auditory is you're hearing it. So people that do well with auditory learning, they could listen to something over and over and over again. And flashcards can play between the two because flashcards are visual,
Mm-hmm.
as well as auditory. So, some people have a bit of both. Kinesthetic is a lot of touching and, needing to get your hands-on experience, and, kids will kind of show you just how they're experiencing the world,
Mm-hmm.
how they're exploring the world. And it's not always just one. I am predominantly a visual learner. If you start reading me a bunch of directions, I'm going to just be like, let's just play. We're starting a new game. I'm like, let's play around so I see it and then I'm good. A couple of my kids, they want to read those instructions and go through it. I will not read directions. I will not read instructions.
Yeah.
So again, that's visual learning. It's not that I don't want to learn. It's just I know what my strength is as a learner. So when we recognize that in our children, we can really help them in that, especially if they're struggling in school. So
Yeah.
if you have a kid that is an auditory learner, you know that they can just record their voice and they can then listen to it over and over of a lesson that they need to learn and
Yeah.
absorb, or audiobooks. A lot of people believe that, oh, doesn't count because you're not really reading. But what if they learn in a fashion that they'd rather hear it? So it makes learning so much easier. It makes life a lot easier, I feel too. And yeah, like you said, it's learning about your child.
I just want to backtrack just a little bit to what you said earlier about grandparents being narcissists, and feeling like they have ownership of the grandchild, which really resonated with me in lots of different ways. And I just had some thoughts on it about how you were very comfortable apologizing to your son for the mistakes you made as a parent. And I feel like this is a huge problem nowadays, is that there are parents and grandparents in the older generations that they would rather lose a relationship with their child than take responsibility or look at themselves. Like, it's like such a defeat. Why do you think that is? Like, with your experience, like, why do you think it's so hard for these types of grandparents or parents to apologize and take responsibility?
I think one is pride, and especially because I feel live in the land of narcissism. Narcissism really separates you from the self. And being separated from the self, you don't have the ability to self-reflect and to look at yourself of maybe I could have done differently. And so it's very much pushing outward. Everybody else is the problem. It's not me. And they often do that, no matter what kind of narcissist, because narcissism, I believe to be a spectrum. And whether you're an overt narcissist, a covert narcissist, it is very difficult for them to see themselves as having done anything wrong. And so I think that is primarily the problem, but it's also a deeper wounding. They don't want to do the work because they have to really look at the stuff that hurt. And it's hard. It's hard doing that kind of healing. And I especially having done it, I'm not a fan, but it was really important and it changed my life for the better. And but they're not taught that. The older generations are taught that therapy is for crazy people and that you shouldn't have to do it, and that it would involve being medicated, and maybe it does. But they have the preconceived notions on what therapy and getting any kind of help is, and it's usually negative, and it usually would say something or suggest something bad about them. And I think, like, when I think of someone like my mother, I know a lot of why she won't go is because she might actually have some of the things pointed out to her that weren't good choices and doesn't want to face that. And so, because my sister and I used to chat about that, because, both of my sister and I, essentially had to go to therapy because of the kind of parenting we had. You don't get out of our household without needing therapy, whether or not you got it. It's, it's a really important point of self-love to take that step. And most narcissists do not love themselves. So
Yeah.
they don't have the ability to do that. So it is their own shortcomings. And
Yes. Yeah.
it's challenging, but and it's sad when you see like your parents become that, like, oh, you would rather not have a relationship than actually try and do work. My in-laws are like that as well. Energetically speaking, like attracts like.
Mhm.
So to have grown up
Yeah.
in a very narcissistic
Yeah.
home, I would have had to have married into one now, wouldn't I have?
Yeah.
So that
That's
was,
I've had similar experiences, unfortunately, and it's sad because when you join a family, you really hope that you get a healthy family. You're like, I
oh,
didn't get
yes.
one,
Nope.
so nope. Life is
Nope.
like, I'm going to give you another lesson. You haven't learned enough. But yeah, I thank you for sharing what you said about how the narcissist doesn't love themselves, because if the like people get confused with narcissism because they're like, oh, isn't narcissism like egocentric, like the story about the narcissist like looking at themselves in the reflection and everything. But it is true, because when you look at a narcissist, you can almost measure how much they love themselves based on who they choose as a partner. As generally narcissists choose terrible partners who um, model their bullies or their parents. Like you said with your mom, she chose your dad who was similar to her dad.
Yes.
So it's like if you chose a partner that is kind and generous and patient, you really love yourself. But if you chose a partner that is just authoritative and toxic and all those things. So it's interesting on that end, but also just how they talk so lowly to other people and bully other people is really how they feel about themselves, which is bullying 101. But thank you for pointing that out, because sometimes we forget, and it's nice to reflect on that. And also, I think generationally, with the older generation, like boomers, are the most narcissistic generation, like
100%.
in
Yes.
the world. And for our listeners, I just want to point out that they were raised by the silent generation,
Yes.
which was really giving. Like they like raised their kids like perfectly, gave them money and, love, but in their own way, because they didn't believe in therapy. They were like more reserved, but what happened is that when boomers came of age, they were like, no, I'm going to hoard all my wealth and not give back to anyone. And so it was like this vicious cycle. And I just find it so interesting that so many people from that generation haven't broken that cycle. And it's just being repeated again and again and again. But you're right, narcissism is like a spectrum. Like there's different types of narcissists in every generation. And I just think it's amazing that your thyroid healed throughout your spiritual journey.
I'd love to speak to what you brought up because I think it's so
Mhm.
important when you talk about the different generations, the economical aspect of it, because that's a lot of
Yeah.
what shifted and that's a lot of what fed narcissism, because the silent
Mhm.
generation was not known for an economic
Yeah.
diversity. And whereas boomers really had that ability, especially like the 80s, when you think of, and ironically, my parents both worked on Wall Street. That's where they met. So like 80s Wall Street being a
Wow.
big thing, my parents, that's how they became wealthy. So, this was like that generation that really got to
Mhm.
become that. But, again, like money does something, for
Yeah.
better or for worse. So if you grew up hearing things like, oh, money doesn't grow on trees, and
Yeah.
people who have money aren't kind, they tend to be
Yeah.
obnoxious, or whatever, you have this understanding. So that, I think, also just created this separation in the generations, and
Yeah.
then that carried on. And then, not to say that everybody is that has money and doesn't do well with it. There are people that do really well with it, but when you have that element of narcissism tied with money, that's
Yeah.
what creates this
Yeah.
generational divide as well. Because
Absolutely.
like
I could talk
growing
about it
up, we
all
weren't
day.
talking about generations. We
Yeah.
weren't like this generation, that generation. That
Yeah.
became a thing
Yeah.
when definitely as Gen X was, getting
Yeah.
into adulthood. And
Yes.
now we were really pinpointing what the generations are. And now we haven't gotten off of that conversation and that topic
Yeah.
because it's divisive and, societally speaking, people like to keep that divisiveness because it keeps us
Yes.
against each other.
Yes.
So I don't love that, but I'm not going to feed it either. I'm
Yeah.
going to look at like, okay, this is just kind
Yeah.
of what I dealt with. This is what I'm raising. This is my
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, we are, I think, seeing a common trend amongst boomers as far as narcissism. And when we look at that, from an economical perspective,
Yeah.
you can see a lot of how that evolved.
Yeah, and also like I could talk about this all day, but I'll just say one more thing. I feel like you're right. Like it's like you almost have to choose a battle of like, okay, I don't agree with that, but I'm still gonna live my life because it is toxic
Yeah.
divide. And we're seeing a divide now between like Gen Z and like millennials and like, so it's like generational, but it's also like um I do find it interesting that the silent generation, you're right, they weren't financially like well off and they gave like their shirt off their back to their children and loved them unconditionally. And then boomers grew up to not do the same for their children in terms of like love, money, like career. It was like just you have to work hard like you like because I worked hard but they didn't really work as hard, so it's like just so many triggering points about boomers. And also something that I noticed about boomers is that they don't look after their grandchildren as well as their grandparents
No,
did.
definitely not.
They're like,
No.
I don't care if you had kids. Like, I'm retired. I've already
Yep.
done that. It's like they had children for the image,
A
not
100%.
actually want
Yes.
to have kids. And you're right about the wealth. It's like it ties into the narcissistic picket fence dream and we have a perfect family. Like, it's all connected. So, yeah, it's just so interesting. Chris, I want to talk about how your thyroid healed and your spiritual journey throughout this, and why it led you to do the work that you're doing.
So I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and my thyroid just felt like it was very enlarged. I felt like it was
Mhm.
just so swollen. And you could even still see how, like, my neck still kind of protrudes a bit because of it. And it, for me, I can say I've had a lot of experiences medically where I've been given a diagnosis or told something and I don't accept it. I, that's really helpful part of my nature that I don't accept something if it doesn't agree with my inner feeling. So when I had a doctor say you have to be on medication for life, my first response was no, I don't. I just knew I didn't. I didn't know how, but I knew I didn't. So I started finding certain things of what could support me more naturally, more holistically. How can I support my thyroid? It did, didn't happen overnight. It's not going to heal overnight. I knew that. And over time, I just started doing things to help. And because I had that element of belief that I could, was pivotal because it started leading me to the right healers. So I wasn't now going to Western medicine anymore. It's where I started, it's where I got my diagnosis, but it wasn't where I was going to find my healing. And I knew that. So that was part of it. And then also because as I was healing, I was regulating my nervous system. I wasn't in constant fight and flight anymore. So that inflammation had gone down. And so while it was calming down, as I was also seeking these holistic doctors and treatments, it was all interesting how that was coming together at the same time. So it very much does talk about the law of attraction, and you what you attract is who you are. So I was open and ready for healing. I was open and ready to reduce inflammation. I was open and ready to become a new version of myself. I didn't know it at the time. I had no idea. I just wanted to feel better. But not having to fight my parents anymore, not feeling I needed to be at the forefront to protect my children. While I absolutely am energetically, I didn't feel like I had to be in battle anymore. And that did something to my body. It got to calm down. And I didn't even realize how much that was contributing to my thyroid disorder. And that was a really big thing because the only time I get a little bit of a trigger in my thyroid is when something comes up. Because I started noticing I'd get some sort of nasty note from my mother or message. Even I block this woman on all platforms and she still finds me through. When you have a narcissistic parent that is relentless, you know this experience. I know people have experienced this because it's common. And I would, for like 24 to 48 hours after, I would feel like that inflammation.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then over time, I recognized what was going on, and I have the
Mhm.
tools now. Like, this is how I calm myself. This is how I nurture myself. This is how
Mhm.
I heal myself. Uh, but it's so interesting how sensitive our bodies are to our environments.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, stress literally kills. So,
Yes.
and trauma kills too, like over time if you don't address it. So, thank you for sharing that. Are you able to tell us a little bit about your book?
I wrote this book. It's called An Old Soul's Journey. And I sat one day and I wrote a poem. And as I wrote it, I heard, this is a book.
Mhm.
And so I found an illustrator, and she completely brought my words to life in just the most beautiful way. But what I didn't know at the time is that it was going to serve as a guide for inner child healing
Yeah.
because it looks and it reads like a children's book, but it
Mhm.
is about healing, connecting with,
Mhm.
and bringing that love energy back to your inner child that has been lost along the way, because old
Mhm.
souls really struggle. They pick
Yeah.
very difficult lessons.
Mhm.
It is not easy, because I always say that they've done the easy classes. Now they've signed up for the harder stuff because it does more for them as a soul and for their evolution. But I really feel like I serve as a guide to help
Mhm.
old souls heal, to help them
Mhm.
evolve, to help them release the trauma energy.
Mhm.
And that's, yeah, what brought me to that book.
I love that. And that's a beautiful illustration on the cover. It's like it's just calming and peaceful. Where can our guests find your book?
It's actually, you can find it on my website, which is my
Mhm.
name, chriswasko.com, or it's on Amazon. Easy to find there as well.
Perfect. Can you tell us a little bit about Spicy Old Souls, the type of work that you do to help people regulate their nervous system, and where our listeners can find you?
Yeah, so Spicy Old Souls is a program, and it is not yet on my website, but will be soon, where people can go. Because for a while, I was just doing the one-on-one, and while I love it, I know I'm not going to be doing it forever, and this will help people heal. Because old souls, they don't need help in this way that we generally understand as seeking help, because old souls are more often than not their own healers. They just need to find what helps them heal. So the system I've developed is really going to help them heal, help them evolve, help them get back to themselves. But I have this saying that it's in the program: once you understand yourself is when you go beyond yourself. And really, because it leads to more of the spiritual awakening, you to your clairs coming online and onboarding, just as mine did. I am no more special than anybody else that would do this kind of work, and I just can give you the tools that I had to learn along the way. And I've had a lot of things channeled through me in creating this program. So that I'm very excited about that one, because when it's beyond this world, you just know it, and you feel that resonance. So I'm just honored to be part of that. And the other thing I do is energy healing and readings, where I read the chakra system. I can read an individual's chakra system, the seven main chakras. That is, we have many chakras, but I read the seven main ones, and I find the trauma energy, and I help heal it.
Yeah, I love learning about chakras. I had that gifted to me, a book about it. Yeah, I find it so interesting. I feel like it's good to be open to everything in this lifetime that we have because, I do think that whatever your stance is politically, religious wise, like there is a higher power and, um, becoming spiritual and going on a spiritual journey can look different for everyone, but there's not one way to heal someone. There's so many different ways. What would you say out of the seven chakras is like the most common that people that you work with have like blocked?
Solar plexus, because solar plexus and narcissistic abuse tend to go hand in hand. I'm actually writing a book on that right now.
What is the solar plexus?
The solar plexus, great question. So the solar plexus is your chakra that resides just below the rib cage. It's like your upper gut,
Yeah.
right? So if you are very good at understanding when you get a gut feeling about something and you feel that in your stomach in a good way or a bad way, butterflies in the stomach is also solar plexus.
Mhm.
But kind of like that feeling of dread, that's solar plexus. But anyone that has dealt with narcissism or narcissistic abuse, they will have a challenge in their solar plexus. A narcissist will also reveal a different kind of solar plexus. So I've learned a lot of that in my work too, which not a lot of information is out there, which is why I felt guided to write about it. So I hope to have that book out by the end of this year.
Amazing. I need to go back and read about chakras. I need a refresh, so I'll definitely look out for your book. And Chris, we've talked about so much today, but I'm really interested about you being a medium. Are you able to tell our listeners a little bit about that path and if they wanted to see you, what they would expect?
So, mediumship for me, I called my gateway into this type of work because that's really what I started to recognize as I started seeing people in spirit. And I had no idea what they were trying to say. I didn't know how to communicate with them. So I started by taking classes to learn mediumship, to learn that what it is to be a medium.
Hmm.
And over time, I recognize like I don't love doing mediumship readings, which is why I don't offer that currently as a service. I might get back to that, but I recognize for myself, I really appreciate working with the living rather than the those that are not currently living. And that's just for now. I say that, and yet I did a mediumship read just the other day. So I think they're always there. They're always aware, and I try as much as I try and block them out. They're just always right there, anyways. But like I said, I really feel guided to help the living at this time. But if anyone is experiencing what I did, and they're just having spirits come up, you can protect your energy around it. Like, don't, if it's because that could exhaust you, learn to protect your energy, learn to guard your energy and learn how to communicate with them. Take some classes. I do teach classes on spiritual development, psychic development, because a lot of people just were asking me, I don't know how to do this. Could you help me? So that's what I got me into teaching too. So, but trust your journey, trust your path. It is fun. I think that was the one thing that I think helped me so much. I had so much fun with it when I
Yeah.
started learning about it. I read every book I could. I felt like I couldn't learn enough.
Hmm. Yeah, I didn't used to believe in psychics and mediums when I was younger, but as I've gotten older, I've watched so many shows and stories, and I'm like, yeah, I think there are people that can tap into that energy, and it's always really entertaining for me to see those because I think it also provides healing for those with loved ones that have passed or whoever. So Chris, thank you so much for being so vulnerable with us today and diving deep into those trauma stories. I know it's not easy. Um, we always like to ask our guests at the end of every show, um, with everything that you've endured, your life journey, why are you a survivor today?
I'm a survivor because I chose me, I chose my family, and I chose to love myself. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for even everything I experienced because it got me to where I am. And I don't even know if I'd change anything, maybe a few things. But it, like I said, I really value where I'm at, and I'm grateful for this strength and for this element of peace I've been able to get to because of it.